This week I've been talking about David Livingstone. He was a missionary to Africa. African tribes were often fighting with each other. Then the Boers, B-O-E-R-S, were Dutch farmers who came to Africa. They immigrated and used and sold slaves. So this turned many of the tribes against Europeans. But David was a strong abolitionist. He stood with the native Africans against slavery. Many tribes helped him and were very kind, but there were others who did not like him. In this story, David was met by tribesmen and taken to the chief. The chief said this, "No, you cannot cross the Congo River, not until you give me something that I want. A man, an ox, or a gun would be good," and he laughed really hard while his two front teeth were missing. You see, beads were often used as money between tribes. David offered the chief some of his beads. David was not going to give up one of his men to be used as a slave, or in fact anything else that he had. The chief shouted, "I am a man of power. I may take a man, an ox, and a gun. You insult me with your beads." David knew very well that this chief could kill them and nobody would ever know what happened to them. David tried to buy some time, so he said, "Let me talk with my men tonight." "Very well," said the chief, and he agreed. He said, "You can't cross the river without us, and don't try to go back or we'll find you." And he laughed out loud, trying to incite fear in all of the men. That night, David and all of his men sat around a fire on the riverbank. They were discussing their terrible predicament, and I imagine they prayed really hard. When out of the bushes there came a sound, and David grabbed his gun. A man in uniform came out from the bushes and introduced himself. He said, "I am Sergeant Cipriano de Abreu from the Portuguese army." And then he bowed. "Can I help you?" David's jaw dropped in shock. There was a Portuguese settlement just over the river, and he could ferry them there. So in the middle of the night, they all packed up their things and headed over the river. The Basenji chief heard all the commotion, and their men brought guns and started firing, but no one was shot and all were safe. Once at the settlement, they were served the best meal they had had in 4 months, and all of the men ate heartily. Then the sergeant supplied he and his men enough supplies to make it to the trading post. And when they arrived there, the captain was just as generous as the sergeant was. They were given clothes to replace their ratty rags and more meals. He sent a corporal with them to guide them to the coast. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord our provider, had been with David and his men on their journey.